So my name is Graham Roche. I've been an engineer at AmpAi for 8 years now. And for the last 1 year, I've been spending most of my time working on generative AI, how to incorporate generative AI into our product, and spending a lot of time with our customers working on the strategy for integrating generative AI into their tooling workflows and then their products themselves, and that's been a lot of fun. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Hope and Zainab. Zainab, you met a little earlier in the keynote, who for the last 6 months have been absolutely invaluable to us, helping work through the beta for the AI assistant that Joyce demoed earlier. We're going to be talking today about their initial experiences with generative AI. This is prior to any time at AmpAi, as well as some of the changes that they've seen in their own workflows, the way they work, the way they go about doing their job. So before we really launch in, I'm going to have the two of you introduce yourself. Hope, would you be able to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Excited to be here. Hi, I'm Hope Velasage. I manage digital marketing analytics and audience enablement at Wyndham. For those of you who don't know, Wyndham is a hotel company with over 20 different brands and thousands of hotels across the world. On the audience enablement side, I'm responsible for working with teams to create and activate audiences, as well as get performance analytics on those.
Cool. So I imagine that there's probably a bunch of people in the room that have jobs very much like yours. Would you be able to just share a little bit about your day-to-day relationships with partners or stakeholders? Just give us a kind of fuller picture of the kind of work you do.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the easiest question you can ask someone, but it's so hard to define because I'm sure we all can relate to this. We're doing a million things in a day. But I'll talk about the audience enablement piece just because obviously that's relevant to this conversation. But teams will come to me like paid media, CRM, brand marketing, as well as their agencies. They'll come to me and ask for new audiences to be created. And so what I'll do is I'll create those audiences, activate them, their orchestrations, and then make sure those orchestrations are running smoothly. We have hundreds of orchestrations. We have a lot of activations that we do. So we're just making sure that those are all running smoothly, as well as doing like audience analytics, as in like figuring out, well, actually, I'm working on something right now, trying to define what a high-value person would be. So it's not as easy as just being like, oh, it's this person that spends X amount of money this year at Wyndham. Like, it's not that easy. It's figuring out, okay, well, is it the top 5% of spenders, the top 10? Like, what does that look like? What is the bell curve? Are there outliers? Are there things skewing the data? So really digging into the data in AmpAi and figuring out how to define those types of audiences. And then at the end of the day, I'm also the person that's kind of bridging the gap between teams. So I'll be working with paid media and CRM, like I said, but making sure they're reaching their own goals, but then making sure there's synergies between them, that we're driving Wyndham's goals overall of direct contribution, second stay. So just kind of being that middleman between teams.
Great, thank you. All right, Zainab, we had the pleasure of meeting you earlier. It was brief. Could we hear a little bit more about your day-to-day as VP Product?
Yeah, absolutely. I work as the VP of Product at Bobbit. In my day-to-day, I'm responsible for our company's digital products, our email products, our newsletter products, all of our lead generation products. Those fall under me as well. So I manage those, continuously improve those. I'm also responsible to make sure that our digital tech stack is managed, maintained, and current, so that our editors who are creating this content, which I talked about during keynote, they can continue to create it and make it available wherever our audiences are. So I oversee our digital tech stack, and a huge part of my job is also building, managing, maintaining this first-party database, because we are a data company and we need to know who our audiences are, what resonates with them, what do they engage with, and then pass that to the business so we create relevant content and educate our customers so that they can make sure that their products, solutions, services are remaining relevant with what the audiences need. So.
Great. So I'm going to ask a follow-up. Bobbit's business in general is pretty different than many of the brands that we have in the room. it can be fairly obvious to understand how a brand like Wyndham or Vail Resorts, I'm looking out at TK in the audience, or Gap, connects with their customers via a CDP. But how does that fit into the technology stack for Bobbit?
It's actually very, very similar, Graham, believe it or not, because for us, like I said, it is just as important to know who our audience is, what are they engaging with, and normally in a B2C environment, you make a sale. For us, every time somebody subscribes to one of our email products or subscribes to our newsletter, that's the equivalent of a sale. We never charge our audiences because we're here to serve them, we're here to serve the content. But in that regard, we need to make sure that we create, like Hope mentioned, the right segments so we're delivering the appropriate email products. So we're sending out the newsletters that resonates with this segment. Or if the newsletter is about sustainability, I need to look in the CDP to see, okay, who would be interested in this topic? What job titles would be interested in learning more about, say, telematics or our public safety. So it's actually very similar to how a B2C player would use it. It's just our business model is a little different.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the main focus of this session is on generative AI and how these two have been working to incorporate various aspects of generative AI into their workflow. But taking a step back for a minute, I just want to set the stage for everyone that we're at such an early phase of this technology. Looking back, it was only really 14 months ago since we saw GPT-4 come out, which was kind of the first manifestation of a GPT model that you could see some real intelligence behind. And then only 6 months since it started to get proliferated into the tools we use more generally. So we're really, really at the start of the curve here. So before getting into anything about Amperity-centric, I'm curious, Zainab, to hear more about your early experience with generative AI, types of challenges you saw. You spoke earlier about becoming AI fluent, I believe was the way you described it. I'm curious how you went about learning that, because it's a challenge that lots of people face.
Yeah, so I jumped on the ChatGPT wagon. I was on the wait list. I was really not happy about it to get access to ChatGPT, but I was on the wait list. But even before that, I was using a tool called Lex.page, which had AI. It was using AI, and primarily my use case at that time was I have to write a lot. And I have writer's block. I'm a horrible writer. I need to write release notes. I need to write requirements. I need to write training documents. And then, stakeholder communication, executive communication. So I was using ChatGPT AI tools to kind of say, okay, pretend like you're this and take this information and write the release notes. Now write training. So that's how it started. Then it moved into some really cool stuff where I'm like, okay, can you give me the HTML or CSS? Or can you change that color to blue, and what's the CSS for that? And I didn't have to go to a digital designer and put in a Jira ticket and have it in a sprint to get that, right? Like I could get it from ChatGPT. So I got into that. You heard me during keynote. Like now I'm asking you, can you just give me the code to do this huge ETL, and it gets it done. I work a lot on lead generation. And with lead generation, API integrations are a thing. Yeah. And when those errors come up, it used to be that I could say, is the endpoint URL correct? Is the field mapping correct? That was my skill level. Now I can take that little postman error and ask ChatGPT, what is this error? Help me understand it. And usually it does a really good job, so I can then go find help to fix it. It won't fix it for me, but I can find the help. So again, I've been AI fluent for a while. I'm a big believer, a big supporter. So I've been using the tools and happy to continue using them.
Cool. Hope, can you walk us through your introduction to generative AI?
Yeah, so I actually had never used any Gen AI before this beta. So I feel like it boiled down to just like my lack of knowledge and its capabilities, because like looking back, I'm like, why? But this beta completely opened up my eyes to Gen AI, and I actually started to dabble in ChatGPT and use it for random things throughout my day-to-day. So it's been a pretty rewarding journey, though, in using this tool and using ChatGPT and random things now.
Yeah, it's funny. about, I guess, 4 or 5 months ago, Joyce and I were doing a bit of a road show, doing demos for a bunch of different customers that we thought might be interested in generative AI, and we'd done 4 separate demos in the week, and then we land at Wyndham with Hope and Jackie. And I remember doing this demo where it was the first time either of them had ever seen the GPT-4 model produce any result. And I could see their eyes widen and their minds were kind of blown. And I felt really bad taking credit for what this foundation model was doing. I'm like, okay, we've done some cool stuff on top, but mostly this is GPT-4 and just being actually really impressive. So anyway, that was my fun anecdote. Great. Okay, so I guess my transition here will be, you weren't using any sort of generative AI previously. What got you interested in participating in the beta? Why did you take our call?
Yeah, so I mean, our team at Wyndham's always interested in being part of betas. We're always looking for ways to improve and innovate our systems and workflows. And we're the business side of AmpAi. So, we were not and still not our SQL experts. And when we had taken on this responsibility to be the business side of AmpAi, I actually had never done SQL before. And so it was definitely a learning curve. And we were talking about it before. We took those classes online, and they only go so far because they're not teaching you how to relate the SQL to your actual business needs and the data that's in front of you. So there was just always a gap in that knowledge in my understanding. And I thought it was just me, but then it was so reassuring when we talked about it that it wasn't just me. We're all kind of dealing with that issue. So when you guys had brought this to us and showed us its capabilities, I mean, we couldn't say no. I mean, it was a game changer.
That's awesome to hear. Zainab, do you want to walk us through a little bit? What got you interested?
Yeah, I will piggyback a little bit on what Hope just shared, right? I've taken SQL classes before, and anybody who's taken a SQL class, do you remember the data set they give you? It's always a grocery store that has 5 product SKUs. Here are the prices. And then, I come out of it feeling really confident. I know my inner joints, I know my left joint, I know my right joint, I got it. And then along came AmpAi, and in our business, our data is in many, many different platforms. We are in so many different verticals. So bringing the data into AmpAi was one thing, but then we needed to make it actionable, which means I needed to QA, which means I needed to understand this data and then decide how should this get mapped? How will this become usable for my audience team? I needed to write inner joins and left joins and right joins again. And I came into the database and I'm like, I don't know how to use this. I don't know. The product SKUs, the price and the number of products, it's not matching. I can't do it. And so when you came up with, hey, we're going to give you this AI assistant, because before that, I'm asking ChatGPT, if you have this table and these are the fields, how will you write this query? But it doesn't have context. It just couldn't do it. AI assistant could because it's in our database. It knows our tables. It knows our fields. I knew it was going to be a game changer. And this database is important to our business. It's central to our business. Getting it up, running, and ready for our audience team to action on was important. Time was of the essence. So you guys, the AI assistant was a lifeline, and we got it done much sooner because of the AI assistant. Most people in my company think it was my leadership. It really wasn't, but we don't take that away. We let them believe that. But
Well, I did hear videos were being shared with your team of this session, so they might now know.
Delete them.
Shucks. That's really exciting to hear, Zainab. I'm curious, could you share some examples of the specific things you found it to help you with, or the challenges it's allowed you to overcome?
Yeah. So look, as we were building this database, as we're working to kind of make everything actionable, there's still a lot of raw data that's sitting in there. And we have an audience development team that still needs to run the business. They need to keep moving, and they move, as you know, Hope, those requests are like 100 a day, and they need to turn those around. And so I got pulled into, can you write us a query that can find everybody that attended this event, data source 1, from 300 miles from this zip code, data source 2, and they don't subscribe to that newsletter. Okay, data source number 3. Then from that subset, can you look at how many of them opened that one particular email and get me that list? I could not have written this query without that AI assistant. So the AI assistant, the beautiful thing about it is I can start in the visual query, which is where I usually go. Because if you heard me earlier during keynote, input is important. If you feed it wrong information, you're going to get inaccurate information out. So when I start in the visual query, it helps me ensure that most of my input is at least accurate. From the visual query, it's a super cool little button, convert to SQL. My God, what a lifesaver. Convert it to SQL, copy SQL, then go to AI Assistant and say, now to this SQL, can you add criteria 1? Can you add this? Can you make it distinct? And it does such a fantastic job of building trust. It's become kind of like my little SQL coach, right? Because as it works through the query, it explains, I'm using this SQL function. I'm using max to aggregate, and then I'm grouping it by this, and I'm doing a distinct. I think that, I'm sure you guys have that data, Graham, but I think if you look at my prompts from day 1 to my prompts today, you will see that I've moved up a few levels in SQL because of that coaching that I get on the daily with real data. So it's been...
That's really great to hear. Hope, do you want to give us some examples of what you've been able to do?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things I could talk about here, but I'll talk about something that's, I feel like Gen AI, this beta has impacted me the most, and that's when we get requests from leadership. And as we all know, those requests are like the highest of priority and are needed same day or next day. And so what I do is I go right into the Gen AI tool and I figure out how to start my conversation with it. You know, it's like a learning curve. It's now I know what to say to it, but before, you know, you're going back and forth with it a few times, and then eventually you'll get the SQL code that you're ready and you're comfortable with, and then I'll grab that, bring it into my query, and then just add some additional business rules to it. And that entire process takes less than an hour. Like now it's like 30 minutes, and I'm able to provide that data point to leadership and get them, and then I have actual time to add context to the data point and get them everything that they need. And just for context, that process before this Gen AI tool could literally take 3 to 5 days, because as I had mentioned earlier, I am not a SQL expert, so I would go online to like rabbit holes on online forums, on Reddit, like trying to find a snippet of code that I could potentially use, and then I would bring it in and be like, oh, I think this is good, and then I have to try to apply it to my data, and 9 times out of 10 didn't work. And so then I was like, oh, so then I would go ask someone in BI who knew a little more SQL than me, and then they were asking someone on their team who was in a whole different time zone, and it really just, it snowballed from there. Like it just, I was reliant on someone else and on their bandwidth to get my job done, and I didn't like that, you know, and so I feel like the biggest thing, we were talking about this earlier, is the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway I want everyone to have is just independence. Like, the tool has given me independence and self-sufficiency to get my job done faster, quicker, better, and that is truly invaluable.
Thank you. Okay, I love hearing you use the word independence, and Zainab talking about it as your coach. Transparently, when we built the AI assistant, we weren't expecting Hope and Zainab to be our target. We were expecting this to be something that augmented the day-to-day work of someone who was already fairly expert at SQL. We thought they were using ChatGPT anyway, and that it would simply be a convenience to embed that within our query editor. But then what we found as we started going and spending time with these users, we've got so many people that are on the precipice of being proficient in SQL, and we've been calling it more, they're SQL curious. They work with BI and analytical teams all the time. They are comfortable copying a query and maybe changing some things, but they've always been just a little shy of being able to do it themselves. And the AI assistant has been incredibly meaningful in helping them kind of overcome that seemingly insurmountable obstacle. So it's really, really exciting to talk to you guys about it. I love that we were proved wrong in where this would be useful, because I think it ends up being even more valuable than it otherwise would have been. Okay, so thank you. I'd like to finish. What are some key considerations that brands should have in mind as they're beginning the process of adopting generative AI? What are some challenges? And what, I guess, some opportunities that you foresee? And Hope, I'll let you.
So I feel like there's two things that I like to think, I mean, they're pretty basic things, but they're super crucial to be successful on this journey. And I think the first one is just having an open mind. I mean, AI is like, everyone's talking about it and there's like a stigma around it. And I think just in this particular use case, this tool is truly just here to help you. I feel like, as I had mentioned, I like to be independent and self-sufficient where I can. And I thought using it was like almost cheating. So I was like, well, it's just gonna give me the answer. Like, you know, like what's the point? But as Zaina mentioned, it's not just giving you the answer, it's telling you why it did that. And so I've literally learned SQL because of it. And it's applying to the actual business that I needed to, not just a SQL like course online. So just having an open mind throughout the entire process. And then the second thing is just to start. To be completely honest, we had the beta enabled for a few weeks and I didn't even touch it. I don't know why. I just like, again, it wasn't part of my day-to-day. I didn't know its capabilities and so on. So I just did not use it. And then I was running into an issue with a query that was so easy. And I was like, I can't even look this up online because it's that easy. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to use the beta tool. And so I clicked on it. And in that example, it fixed it immediately. And I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And so now it's the first place that I go. So I just think having an open mind and then just using it. And it's not going to be perfect, but like you're on a journey with it, figuring out how it works for you.
Great. Zaina, you want to close us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know there are a lot of product managers, product team in the room. And I think that as we march towards integrating more and more AI tools, building new AI tools, and bringing them into our ecosystem, there's two things, and this responsibility, I think, rests on our shoulders as product managers. There's two things that really stand out. Build the trust. You've got to be able to set up this tool in a way that the person using it can trust it. It's not build a trust in you. No, build a user's trust in the tool. The AI assistant does it, right? By, like we said, when you put in a prompt, it tells you, here's what I'm using, this is the function I'm using, here's what this function does, these are the tables, this is the fields. It gives the user some level of confidence of, okay, this is going to work, I see the logic behind it, and the output will be correct, right? So building that trust is extremely important. It's also important, doing so, what that also does, it coaches the user to become a better prompter. And you've heard me say this before, communication is going to be a big challenge, building this AI fluency. So as product managers, we've been doing this. We've been writing requirements. We know what it is to break it down so that the developer knows exactly what they're coding and what the output should be. So we have this muscle. Rest of the business users don't. They're just getting started. So it's up to us product managers who are involved in building this to make sure, build the trust, make it easy to learn this new language, because that's what the business users are doing. Their job here is to learn a whole new language as adults, which is hard.
Great. Okay. So just recapping, I like this notion of kind of a shared accountability you've got, leaning into the fact that these tools, I'm going to borrow an example that you'd used earlier in one of our rehearsal sessions where historically you're trying to write a function and you put it into Excel and it doesn't work. Excel gives you an error and blows up loudly and says, like, go away, this doesn't work. Or if you get it right, it gives you the answer. And generative AI is a little different. And you need to learn how to be able to tell the difference between when it's clearly on the right track and when it's going a little off the rails and you need to prompt it back in the right direction. So I appreciate you highlighting that for us. And then Hope, this message of just start, that resonates so much with me. It was a challenge that we had at AmpAi looking back the last 18 months as we've been figuring out ourselves, what's the right way to incorporate generative AI into the product? What's the right way to help our customers start on their generative AI journey? And the thing we found was we needed to kind of get out of our own way and just try something. And along the way, you encounter what's the barriers and how we're going to market it and how we're going to get legal approval for it and how we're going to go through privacy reviews and how we're going to talk to our customers about this. And the only way you get through that is you pick something with acknowledging that you could be wrong, and you learn from that experience. So anyway, thank you so much, both of you. I really, really, really appreciate the time and for participating in our beta, giving us so much feedback. It's been truly invaluable. Our product is better because you participated and you helped, so thank you. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.